Hello and welcome to AXSChat. This week we've got Mark Bullock with us. I'm delighted to have you with us, Mark. We're talking about the topic of inclusive sport. So it's really exciting to have you with us. And you tell us a little bit more about how you came to be involved in inclusive sport and things like Parallel London, because I know you've got involvement in both sort of parasport and also bringing people from all walks of life into sport. So thank you and welcome to AXSChat. Tell us a bit
thank
more.
you very much, and start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to be part of this chat. I've learned so much since I've been involved in just over a year. It's been a real eye-opener for me, even though I've been involved in disability sport since the early 90s, when I shared an office with Tim Reddish, who went on to be chairman of the British Paralympic Association. And I had a brief as a tennis development officer to develop tennis for people with a disability, which we did in the city of Nottingham in partnership with Tim. And right back then we did tennis for the visually impaired, tennis for the deaf, physical disability and learning disability. And we did 4 pilot projects in schools, wrote them up, got them published in an LTA, or a Lawn Tennis Association coaching magazine, and then we got a few inquiries. And one of them I got was from a wheelchair player who wanted to develop their skills, so I started coaching him, and then a couple of other wheelchair players, and went on to be the national coach for Great Britain for a few years. Then an opportunity at the International Tennis Federation came up to be wheelchair tennis development officer, which I took on. Then I became the head of that department as the wheelchair tennis manager. I did that for a further 8 years. But all alongside that, I was interested in other impairment types. And as well as working at the elite end of sport, as you say, Neil, I'm passionate about getting disabled people active in all senses. And most recently, I've been involved with an unbelievably successful event, in my mind, in particular in London, Parallel London, it's fully inclusive. There's no barriers to entry. Anyone can take part, and that's been really exciting to be involved in that project at perhaps the other end of the performance spectrum in terms of getting people active.
Yeah, I think maybe you can tell us a little bit more. I know a bit about Parallel London, but our audience may not. But it's essentially an event that anyone can participate in, and there are various different ways and means, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's a run. It's a set of fun runs. The brainchild of Andrew Douglas. So it's come a little bit out as a legacy of London. And there's a 10K, a 5K, a 1K, and 100 meters. So there's a range of distances which allow everybody to take part in a distance of their choice. And there's also a supersensory 1K with different things around the course that stimulate the senses, so bubbles, smell, different things to touch, lights, and I think that was one of the most popular courses. So the whole philosophy is that everybody can take part. The hashtag is side by side. You start together, you finish whenever, is one of the phrases that they were using. So there's no pressure. Having said that, if you're a good runner, you can still enter it and run a quick time if you choose to. Alternatively, you can do it as slowly as you like, and the spectrum of ages, spectrum of disabilities, impairments types was huge, and just great to see, in particular, families doing things together. So families with a disabled and a non-disabled child being able to participate in an event together, and it's been a huge success, I think.
And what was the catalyst for doing this? Because I know that there's been a lot of focus on parasport, and also, not just at the elite end, but trying to get people engaged at the other end. Was it to try and engage friends and family so that people can exercise together? Is the idea that it's more sustainable?
Yeah, I think
when everyone can be involved together.
I think a few things. I think the I've been involved in the Paralympic movement for many years,
Yeah.
but it doesn't cater for all impairment types,
No.
and it is disability specific. So it has a place. It's a wonderful movement, and something I'm really proud to be a part of. But I think Parallel London does much more than that. It caters for a range of impairment types that possibly the Paralympic movement doesn't pick up. The emphasis is on inclusion, so it's not a disability specific event. So, for example, the London Marathon has a wheelchair race, but the elite racers go off on their own. Parallel London, you're all on the start line together. It's fully inclusive. So if you've got family members with a disability, you're on the start line with them, and you can go at completely your own pace. So I think it's trying to embrace lots of different things. Research that the English Federation of Disability Sport have done in the UK suggests that 64% of disabled people want to do physical activity and sport with non-disabled family and friends. So you've still got the 30% that perhaps want to do more traditional disability or Paralympic sport, but there's a big audience out there that would like to do things with family and friends. I think Parallel is trying to particularly embrace that 60%. And that was certainly something I've done it twice now. I entered last year as a runner. This year I was more involved. And certainly the sense that you got from the families that were involved, it was something that they could all do together.
Thank you for that, Mark, and welcome for being on AXSChat. So, no, you mentioned that Parallel London is fully accessible, but I'm sure that there are a few challenges that you face when you are organizing. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? I still what can you do even to improve that, or even, let's say, extend that to other areas of the country?
Yeah, luckily I'm not the organizer, so I don't have all the challenges, but I'm very close friends, or become very close friends with the organizer, and I think they're constantly looking to learn, to improve the inclusion. For example, a practical example was at the start, there's music to sort of hype everybody up at the start of the race, but of course there's perhaps a segment of people who are taking part in the race that would prefer to be in a quiet zone before they race. So they're continuously looking for ways to make it more inclusive and learn from the people that come and take part about what works, what doesn't work. And of course there are challenges. The Super Century race, which for me was where I learned the most, and I did it. I ran the 10K, and then I walked the Super Century and learned a lot myself. And that race could develop, but of course it's more expensive than the other runs, because to develop those century elements of the course, it's not as cheap as just having an open course. So there are challenges, and I think that's part of the fun, and certainly one of the reasons I've enjoyed being involved in it is I have learned so much in the last year about trying to improve access to physical activity and sport for everybody. My background has very much been disability sport, tennis in particular, and I guess in the last year, 18 months, I've perhaps realised that although we thought we were being inclusive, there's a much wider spectrum of people out there that we would like to include in physical activity and sport. So there are challenges, and I don't want to speak too much on behalf of the organiser of Parallel London, but I know there are ambitions to look at spreading the concept to other parts of the country, perhaps in the future taking it around the world, and also encouraging and perhaps influencing other providers of opportunities for people to take part in physical activity to be more inclusive. So one of the partnerships I know they've developed is with what we call in the UK Park Run, where on a Saturday morning all over the country people turn up at 9 o'clock and run 5 kilometres. and they're already very inclusive, and there are a number of races that encourage people with a visual impairment to come along. They provide guides, and I think the idea is to influence parkrun to be as inclusive as possible, and encourage other agencies to look at their provision a little bit more inclusively than perhaps we have in the past.
But I also know that you're by looking to your Twitter feed that your interest is not just sport. So just a few days ago, I saw a lady that you were tweeting about London Fashion Week.
Yep.
So we saw that it was really interesting to see that type of presence at London Fashion Week. Can you tell us about that and how in your day, whatever depending what how far you want to share that with us. Now, how you deal with with disability and with accessibility in your daily life, and how do you feel that we know that sometimes this is a topic that doesn't get much attention of the mainstream media, and people who are working in this area, they need to make the effort to create awareness.
Yep.
So
Well,
how important is also social media in order to create awareness and to expand the work that people with disabilities are doing?
well, I think now I have lived experience of disability in the sense that my wife is a wheelchair user. We met through tennis, but her passion, in addition to sport, is also fashion. So the woman I was tweeting about the other day is my wife, who was taking part in London Fashion Week, and getting some publicity as a result. And slowly, and it is slow, inclusive fashion is slowly becoming more into the mainstream. And London Fashion Week this year, from my understanding, did much more than they've done before. And there were a number of disabled models involved in different elements of London Fashion Week. A lot more could be done. But my view on life generally is sport is only an extension of society and life. So we can only, sport, physical activity can only be inclusive and accessible if the rest of society becomes inclusive and accessible too. So transport's the obvious one. If we don't have inclusive transport, it makes it very difficult for people with a disability or an impairment to get to physical activity and sport. And what's really, I've learned a lot through AXSChat is obviously trying to improve the communication, because obviously if people can't find out about things, it's not going to. So for me, sport doesn't sit in a bubble, and physical activity, it sits in society as a whole. And so we have to improve all elements to allow people to access sport and physical activity in the right way. And if disabled people are seen in the media, not just in sport, but other areas of life, then it'll make it much easier for everyone to be accepting of people with a disability when they present themselves to do whatever the activity is. And I think the Paralympics has done a fantastic job of promoting disability sport at the elite level. And I think there's a great pathway now in, not everywhere in the world, but certainly in the UK, there's a great pathway if you want to be a Paralympic athlete. I think where a lot of work still needs to be done is if you want to just go to your tennis club or your gym, and how on both sides disabled people can engage with that, because they feel they get the information and then they feel comfortable about going, and then the receptionist and the coaching staff, depending on the environment, are also receptive. And I think social media and AXSChat in particular is having a huge influence. I mean, as you know, I use social media a lot, but AXSChat has introduced me to a lot of people, mainly outside of the sporting world, which has really made me look differently at the way we provide sport and physical activity. And I've met Molly Watts. I think it was Molly that suggested that I was a guest, and we're going to hopefully meet up to look at ways of improving opportunities for the deaf-blind community to access sport and physical activity, because they were a group that I hadn't really considered until AXSChat, and they at the moment don't sort of really fit in either blind sports or deaf sports as they traditionally present themselves. So it's been really interesting, and as a social media, I think is very powerful to perhaps then influence the mainstream media, because that's where they'll pick things up from.
Yeah, I think that definitely a recurring theme for AXSChat is always going to be representation of people with disabilities in day-to-day mundane roles, and fulfilling all of the different roles. Okay, so not just mundane, but right the way across society, not not being segmented, compartmentalized, or whatever. I think that then if you're taking on the point that Molly raises for disability sport, it has been very compartmentalized. The Paralympics, which is fantastic, and I work with the IPC too, because we provide, in my day job, we provide all of the IT to the IPC. It is definitely designed in such a way that it's focuses on impairment, whereas I think that for most people, and that includes most people with disabilities, A, we're not ever going to be elite, and B, it's just we want to be participating in something. We're not necessarily there to look and win medals, and we don't need to be segmented in the same way. Yes, we need to take into account the specific needs sometimes, and there will be occasions where you need to create sports or create activities like boccia or something specific because of a level of impairment or a particular need. But equally, I think I'm interested in wide and inclusive participation in sport as much as in society in general. The more we spend time together in each other's company doing stuff, whether that be sport or work or relaxation, it's the more we come to understand each other and accept each other for who we are and our capabilities.
I've just delivered this morning an inclusive training session for tennis coaches and volunteers in part of London, and we had a volunteer on the autism spectrum on the course, and it was just brilliant because it sort of emphasised everything that I was trying to say. But we had someone there that was sort of breaking down, I think, a lot of the misconceptions, preconceptions that people had, and increasing their confidence to work with people that perhaps in the past they've never met anybody, so they're nervous. So I think, the Paralympic movement's fantastic and it has a place, but I think there's a lot of work to be done around just including everybody in everything. It's very simple to say, and for those people that follow my Twitter feed, I do a lot of things with my wife, but we try to show imagery and photos of us doing everything in life. And my wife's a former good tennis player, but most other things we do, we've played bowls, she's done some acro yoga, and just trying to demonstrate that most things are can be made inclusive and be made accessible with a little bit of thought, and sometimes without that much thought. If people are open-minded and prepared to give it a go, sometimes I've been surprised by how little adaptations have to be made.
I think it's definitely, sometimes people are daunted by the idea of change and having to do something different, and so sometimes it's a case of meeting people halfway. So that you get over that initial nervousness. So what are the things so you say you're going to be doing some work with Molly around deaf-blind participation in sport. What are the other things that are exciting you right now about sport, in the sporting world? What's going to be big?
I think in many ways, lots of things. I think the Paralympic movement that we've talked about has taken huge strides, and I think will continue to do so, and that's very exciting. I also think Parallel London, this year was only its second year, and I think in the first year it got a lot of media coverage, but mainly in the sort of the disability specific press and journals. This year it was covered by the mainstream media, and I think people are really starting to buy into that, and other partners like Parkrun are open to that. I think that's very exciting as to where that could go, and just generally being involved in trying to spread the inclusive sports message at a very local level. And I'm involved in a project at the moment where we're delivering training to tennis coaches at a very local level. We're doing 5 tennis clubs very local to where I live, and I think we had 14 coaches and volunteers on the first session, and this morning we had another 10, all people who are interested in providing an inclusive offer within their club, and I've been quite excited by the open-mindedness and proving that there is a little bit of a demand there. If there's an offer, then people are willing to come forward and be part of it. So I think it's an exciting time both for the more formal side of Paralympic sport and the way that's going, but also hopefully trying to get everyone, whatever level they want to take part in sport, included. And there's a way to go, but a lot of the personal experiences that I have with my wife when we try and engage with different dance classes, etc. We've done aqua aerobics in our local gym. The instructors have been brilliant at including people. So I think that there's a much greater awareness and understanding out there now. So I think it's an exciting time.
Excellent.
So let me just, if anyone that is listening to us has any particular expertise in coaching and he doesn't feel necessarily confident to talk with people with disabilities or to be work in this space, what type of advice you think it will be interesting for you to provide them in order to to give the next step and being able to support people with disabilities in their area of expertise?
Really good question, and I think that's the thing that I've found in talking to coaches, that the technical side of the sport, they have no problem. You can explain to them that in wheelchair tennis you get a second bounce if you need it. If you're playing blind tennis, you can have up to 3 bounces. That doesn't faze them at all. It's the disability confidence element that we're learning is where the big barrier is. So I think for me the key is trying to set up training sessions and coach education or mentoring, whatever form it takes, where you've actually got people with a disability either there as participants, so you can show how to work with them and the coaches can work with them, or like we had this morning, we had a volunteer with autism, and one of the parent volunteers had a child with autism, and it brought it all to life. So I think that the more environments we can create where there's people are meeting people with a disability, it melts away the barriers that might exist. When I deliver courses with my wife there, it's much easier to get the message across than when she's not there, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So often I find myself as a non-disabled person, sometimes it's much better to have disabled people either with me or in the course. It just makes it so much easier. And I think, as I say, it's not the technical information that phases the coaches or the instructors, because they understand their sport very well. It's just developing the confidence to work with people, meet people, and so not be frightened to make a few mistakes along the way. No, I'm looking forward to working with, say, Molly, for example. I've never worked with a deaf-blind person, so I'm not sure where we'll end up, what sort of sporting activity we'll find, but it'll be a two-way process. I'll bring my background, and Molly will bring her experience of living with that disability, and we'll work out what's possible.
Okay, so I think that I'm guessing there's a need to find more volunteers. Where do you go and recruit from, or is it through the general sporting network?
I think through the
coaching network.
The sport and coaching network, and I think if you'd asked me the same question a week ago, I wouldn't have known the answer to it. But I've been amazed by the two clubs that we've done the training in. You've got the professional coaches there attending the little courses that we're doing, but you've got a large number of volunteers from the club. So I think there is a willingness within local communities to get involved. Volunteering will always have its challenges, and sport is heavily reliant on volunteers. But I think certainly in this space, there seems to be a general willingness to be involved. And I think if they feel, like any volunteers, if they feel valued, they feel engaged, they feel they're making a contribution, they will volunteer.
Great. So I'm hoping that we can get the message out via AXSChat over the next 48 hours as well. Maybe get you some more volunteers. Is there a sort of a sort of an umbrella organisation, or does it all go through the sort of various different sporting bodies? There
are the different sporting bodies. Parallel London, for example.
Yeah.
Most sporting events run off volunteers.
Yes.
Park Run, that is in the UK, every Saturday morning. That is a completely volunteer set of races, and they're always looking for guides. And traditionally that's been for VI guides, but we've also, with Parallel London, looked at the possibility where it's not just people with a visual impairment that might need a guide. There could be other people that would be looking for a guide. So that there's volunteering opportunities through the governing bodies, through local clubs, or through one-off events like Parallel London. And hopefully there'll be more and more of those cropping up. And I think we're looking for volunteers, but we're also just really looking to spread the message. And what I like about AXSChat is, for me, it's reaching a community perhaps that the traditional sporting bodies are not necessarily reaching, because we're not looking for the people who live in sporty families, know they want to be sporty. We're trying to reach the people who perhaps at the moment think sport or physical activity is perhaps not for them, but perhaps it's because it's been presented that they have to be a Johnny Peacock or a David Weir, and actually no, you can go to your local gym and
just get active.
Yeah, you don't have to train at 5 o'clock in the morning 5 days a week. You can engage with sport and physical activity in many ways.
Yeah, no, it's always good for your well-being and physical and mental. So absolutely, it's a great topic. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for being video bombed by my dog. He was pestering me under the desk. Need to thank Barclays for supporting us, because we'll be captioning this video, and contributions from Barclays Access help us keep the lights on. So thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to you joining us on Twitter tomorrow night for AXSChat.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to it.